Okay, the recording has started, and this is the September 17th, 2019 Crossplane community meeting. The big focus for today will be on the 0.3 release that we are intending to go ahead and release and make public tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning Pacific. So we have we're winding down, and we have a number of things to wrap up. So most of the majority of this meeting here is going to be talking about what's left in 0.3 and what are our focuses and what do we potentially need to make some cuts or calls on in order to keep the intended schedule of releasing tomorrow morning. So let's just go ahead and bring up the project board. This is also a good reminder that we, now that we've broken out the functionality of each cloud provider into their own repos, and we have the Crossplane runtime repo, the CLI repo, we are organizing ourselves across a number of different source code repositories that's tracking the issues. We're going to need a better solution for that. Probably the ZenHub experience that we've started using in Upbound, but making that as the public way to track issues as well, so that we can track issues across multiple repositories, so that the issues will live near the code, but we can get a rolled up summary view as well. All right, so I took a pass through the project board this morning. Basically, every single thing on here is about the docs, user guides, examples, blog posts, testing verification, all that sort of stuff there. So all those, wrapping up the quality of the release and getting the user-facing documentation stuff is basically every single thing that's tracked on this board here. If there are, I do have a couple of other issues, two, I think, that I added to the agenda to talk through as well. But basically the board is all about wrapping up the things left in this release. So one thing I wanted to ask about, and I don't think Nick's going to be able to join us, but there's this particular issue here that's sitting in review. And move the Zoom thing out of the way. Get off this monitor, please. It's sitting in review, but I don't see an open pull request for it. Does anybody know the status of this issue, or if we can move it out of the review column, or?
I don't think any effort is spent on this. There's an impending cap of Kubernetes, a way to declare the immutable fields, but it's not possible now. So.
Cool. So, okay, so if there's been no effort on it so far, if it's not in the milestone either, it seems like maybe it's just on the project board extraneously or accidentally. I'm going to go ahead and remove it from the project board because it's not in the milestone either.
Yeah, I don't think it was in the milestone. I think the reason why we opened this up was because in creating managed resources for updating a managed resource, so we really didn't know how far we were going to cover updating different fields. For example, for a VPC or subnet, it has other fields in it, and then we weren't sure how much we were going to say these are not mutable fields or these are, because if a field is mutable, you should be able to technically support by changing it in the Crossplane. It should correspondingly update the external resource too. So I think I brought this up, and then as far as I know, this is for the next release, not for V3.
Right. Yeah, that sounds fair, Javad. So yeah, we'll move it out of the 0.3 project, and we can follow up on it after 0.3. Okay, and then. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to what's left for 0.3. So the top of mind for me is the services guides and stacks guides. So Phil, you're on the call, and then Suskin joined the call too. Phil, do you want to go ahead and talk about what the in-game plan here is for the services guide?
Yeah, so services guide, we basically have PR 793 open for the overview. It comes along with a lot of left-hand nav, table of contents updates, as well as a new welcome page, developer guide page, API, placeholder page, and so forth. But I feel really good with where the overview's at. And then I know that Dan and Muvafak and Javad have all open PRs for the cloud-specific guides. And so I'd propose landing 793. I've addressed the majority of the feedback that I got. I can still go through and do one more quick pass on that. And then that'll land kind of the structure that is better than what we have there now. So it's not gonna like make any regressions, but also getting that on master would allow us to kind of fan out a little bit more. And kind of just submit smaller bug fix PRs for the remainder of the day, instead of trying to do it in one big massive PR. So if we could land 793 and then do quick follow-ons for I think it's Dan's PR 800, and then Muvafak's and Javad's. Then if we could get those all landed in the next hour, I think that would be ideal. So what that might look like is doing kind of peer review, trading peer reviews for, your PR. And so that would help kind of expedite that. So we could effectively pair up. So for example, like, Dan, you could review, like Javad's, and I could review Muvafak's, and Muvafak could review mine, and so forth, right? So that's what I'm thinking there. And then there's some outstanding work that we can talk about as part of 625, which is the overarching epic for all the docs, as a follow-on to this one.
So just to summarize then, so the proposal here would be to soon, in the very short term, merge this overall services guide 793 pull request on my screen into master. And then after that, follow on quickly with doing quick final reviews for the individual cloud provider service guides and get that all into master. And then since it's consolidated in a single place, then it'd be easier and more efficient to iterate or to fix lingering issues there, fix links, like all that sort of stuff in one single consolidated place.
Yeah, I mean, and the main thing there as well is that it has, so the services guide is solid in my view. And then the new structure is really kind of what's important to get out there so that people can kind of, add their index links and stuff like that in there, and we can kind of reorganize stuff as a team as needed.
By structure, do you mean like within the page itself or in the table of contents?
The table of contents. Yeah, the page itself is pretty good.
Got it. Cool. Okay, and that sounds reasonable to me. Is there anyone that knows of any large outstanding feedback that it would be blocking or needs to be incorporated into this services guide PR 793 before we go ahead and merge it into master to continue iterating with smaller PRs, follow-up PRs?
Well, I was waiting on doing some of the reviewing until the lines were broken up a bit. So on my end, I would have to take another look. It's probably fine to merge, and I'm generally for merging and then doing subsequent change sets to improve it after that.
Do you, Suskin, do you think you'll be able to take a pass or put an approval on it? Because I don't think it has an approval yet. Yeah, it hasn't gotten an approval, so it needs one anyways. Are you able to take your pass within the next hour after this meeting is wrapped up?
Yeah, I can take a look at that.
Awesome. Phil, does that sound good for you? Or any of the Stack Guide authors have any dissents to voice?
Are we going to talk about the individual services guides at all, or would this be the place to do that as well?
Yeah, you can bring that up right now. We're on the high level topic of services guide in general.
Okay. I don't think we need to go down this full path, but essentially, so the different services guides, Daniel's given reviews to all of them, which has been super helpful. So thank you for that. But I noticed this morning that I went through and addressed a bunch of comments, and then Muvafak's services guide, was in the same structure as mine, and then he had some differing opinions on some of the comments and that sort of thing. So I'm a little bit concerned, I guess, about the like maybe some difference in style between the different services guides as well as these services and stacks guide. But that might be something where, as Daniel was saying, like it's a merge, and then someone is kind of like responsible for any of that kind of like convergence. So I don't know what that process will look like, but I just wanted to raise awareness that there is probably some stylistic differences, and some of that's obviously related to the service, the provider being used, but I just wanted everyone to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Dan. That's a good point, and I think that does go along nicely with what Phil's suggestion was here, is that getting them all into master and being able to iterate all of them in a single PR afterwards, after instead of making individual feedback requests on each one of the PRs, having somebody go through and do like a conversions pass to bring them all into like a more consistent tone or experience, I think would be probably the most efficient way to do that. So that sounds reasonable to me.
I mentioned that for AWS Services Guide, I'm working on it. It's a draft. I have a demo starting like after this meeting, and then after that, I'm going to be continuing working on that. I'm guessing it's going to be done and ready for review around like 1 or 2 p.m. So that's a little bit coming along later, as I was working on stack guide for AWS. Just for the heads up for you guys. The stack guide is ready, and I sent a pull request. So if you guys take a look at that, that would be awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Javad, for that update there. So let's maybe segue into the stacks guide effort then. Suskin, do you want to give an overall status and where everything stands with the stacks guides?
Yeah, so it's similar. We have all of them in review now. The one that is farthest along, I believe, is the overall guide and the GCP one, just since we've had longer to iterate on that. What I'm thinking at this point is that we have 2 main pieces of work left for the stacks guide. One is getting the tone and structure to be consistent across all of them, and the other one is testing them to make sure that they actually work and any edits based on that. So I also am generally for merging and then testing and refining after that. So I think we could probably merge the overall one and the GCP one and then refine it. And then I haven't taken a look at the Azure one since the feedback was responded to. And then I need to review the AWS one too. But yeah, in general, I'm definitely for smaller iterations and fine with refining things after they're merged.
Cool, that sounds good. Do any of the individual cloud provider stat guide authors have anything that they want to add to that status?
Just one comment. So I think I'm in total agreement with what's being said here, but in terms of like stylistic differences, I think landing what we have and then kind of having a follow-on conversation around how to make the stylistic differences kind of become more consistent. I would definitely deprioritize kind of getting the stylistic stuff ironed out, as opposed to making sure that the examples actually work. And so I know that everybody's probably individually gone through, their guides and made sure, but we're also having a demo at 11 o'clock. And so ideally, if we could get stuff landed by then and then be able to walk through the examples and have them work, that would be awesome. And then we could kind of worry about the stylistic stuff as a follow-on at lower priority. That'd be my proposal.
I agree that the functionality is a higher priority than having perfect style.
Cool. All right. So it sounds like we have plans then for making progress or converging on these services in the stacks guides. So we've got a lot of the team's focus on that now, and we're going to keep pushing on that through the day here to get those in a good shape as soon as possible. The developer guide here, I don't see Nick online right now, so we'll need to sync up with Nick on where that developer guide is or how we're going to expose it in the 0.3 release. Because my feeling is that it's not going to be like a completely fully fleshed out and deep document. I know Nick has done some progress on like guidance around writing controllers and such, and he'll be leaning on the more general stack authorship guidance that we're writing. But in terms of how do we want to expose this in the table of contents or in the 0.3 branch or link to master, et cetera, we need to follow up and get that settled out. So that's still remaining.
And just to comment on that, so PR 793 has a developer guide page that kind of just provides a nice introduction, as well as links to the stack CLI, which is like the hello world, and the WordPress example that is like the end-to-end. And then it'll just have like a link to the infrastructure stack dev guide. So I think we could just drop the link in there to master and have that be kind of like an ongoing thing. So it might just be that simple as opposed to having to try and get it into the docs proper.
Yeah, and that sounds like it could be a reasonable, mitigation or thing to do to get to release 0.3. Marcus and I are taking a charge here at filling out the remaining stack content. And so what I mean by that, like for each one of the stacks that we are publishing in 0.3, all the cloud providers in the WordPress stack, we are putting icons in for every CRD. We're putting in all the metadata, like the overview and description and documentation and all that sort of stuff. So we're filling out all the content for the stacks now. And that should be done today. Marcus is working on Azure right now and probably AWS, and then I started on GCP, and WordPress will be very quick. So that looks like that's in good shape, but it is a focus for Marcus and I today. In terms of the manual testing pass, it seems like that is definitely something that we're doing as part of our guides anyways, of authoring the guides, walking through the guides, testing with the latest code for that. So we're doing that as part of our docs generation or authorship. But when we get everything landed into master, before we create the release branch and tag the release, it would be a very good idea to just do another final sanity walkthrough to make sure everything's in good shape and there weren't any integration or issues or regressions. So we should definitely still do that once everything's kind of landed in master before we do the release tagging and branching. What is the state of the announcement blog post for the release?
We have a draft from earlier that needs to be revamped and slimmed way down. Most of the content made its way into the docs in one form or another when we were kind of originally posting it to kind of announce that we were going to be doing all this work. And so I'll be working on that later this afternoon with Mocha.
Awesome. That sounds great. So Mocha's helping out there too?
Yeah, I'm just chatting with her on marketing. But yeah, the intention is to review that with her or even to have her take a pass.
Awesome. That sounds great. Cool. And then also we have the release process itself. So, in 0.2, we did not have release automation. So we ran the release steps manually. We have automation in terms of the makefile and build submodule, but Jenkins itself does not do the release automation. So we will be, the current plan right now is to do the same thing that we did for 0.2, where we will run the release outside of Jenkins, but with all of the build submodule makefile scripts, the same thing that Jenkins would do. We just don't have those pipelines created and tested, and I think that would be that would not be the best option going forward. I think is to do exactly what we did for 0.2, which works for us. So I think that's the plan right now for each cloud provider stack. The thinking is that we'll do something similar where we'll tag and create a release branch for each one of those as well. Likely we would, since it's the first ones there, we'd just do a 0.1 release for each one of those. There's no need to pin it to the same release cadence or semantic version as main core Crossplane. So starting with those at 0.1 will be good, because we have the exact same build submodule in the cloud provider stack repos that core Crossplane does. The release functionality to tag, promote, build, all that sort of stuff is all there as well. So we got that for free from the build submodule, which is really awesome. So we'll basically do a similar release process that we do for core Crossplane for the cloud provider stacks. One big difference is that promotion, is something to think about a little bit further. I'm not sure. We don't have our stacks versioning and upgrade story figured out yet. That's a 0.4 item to work on in the stack manager. But the thinking isn't fully clear yet about if we want to do release channels or what we want to do there. So I'm considering doing the tagged 0.1 release for all the cloud provider stacks, but not creating like an alpha channel or something like that, because it makes even less sense too, because there's no Helm chart for the Crossplane for the cloud provider stacks. There's the alpha channel makes a lot of sense for the current usage of the Crossplane Helm chart, but there are no Helm charts for cloud provider stacks. They're their own thing. That is the release vehicle, is the stack itself, the stack package. So I'm thinking about not doing a promotion for channels right now, but we can talk through that and think through that a little bit more.
I have one thought about this, Jared.
Yes.
I think having the version makes a lot of sense. And also it would be helpful if we made that version tag soon, at least cut a first version of it so that we can use it in the guides.
Yeah, I think that I would want to land all the content for the stacks first, like the image, like all the resource metadata first.
Well, we can create the versioned tag and then update it later.
We could. How critical is having a version tag right now before we're ready to do the release, though? That's a little concerning to me.
It would be nice if the instructions in the stacks guide for the version that we're releasing are going to use a specific version of the stacks in case anything changes that isn't backwards compatible in the future.
Let's take that offline and think through that a little bit more, because I don't know if we fully understand the implications of that, because we don't have a solid process around this right now. So it's kind of a little bit of new territory for us. Let's like maybe sync up and think through it a little bit further. I'm not super against it, but I don't have it all figured out in my head of how that would work.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool. Thanks for the suggestion. Okay, so that's everything that I believe is left in 0.3. So we have full plates for everybody, but we have plans of attack for all items there. There were a couple of lingering issues here that I then wanted to bring up as potential cuts and punts. Dan Mangum, this issue here, this still exists, right? But is the severity small and likelihood of it happening, frequency and severity small enough that you're okay with punting this for 0.3?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with punting it. It is a pretty specific scenario. It was used in one of the GitLab buckets in one of our examples. I'm not sure that it has to be used for that GitLab bucket, but if I can look real quick here, I believe that it has to do with setting bucket policy only on the bucket. So I'm not sure if that's required or not. but I don't think it is a huge problem. It is a bug, I would say, though. I mean, it's not going to work if you try to provision a bucket with that set. I'd need to dive back into this. It's been a little bit since I opened this issue. But I could go either way. As far as the stuff we're doing in the services and stacks guide, which seems to be the primary thing that we're focusing on, it shouldn't cause any issues. I don't believe we're using buckets in any of those. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, one concern is that if GitLab's example does need that, then that would be a bit of a concern. Phil, what's in the guides there, examples, what's the status of like updating the GitLab example and guide and walkthrough? Is that part in scope or critical?
Yeah, why don't we bring up 625, issue 625, and that basically is the overarching, and then that will have, or should have, a link for all of those things. And so just to kind of recap down there, the related. So I believe updating the GitLab stuff is actually now moved out of here into v0.4 as a separate top level issue. And so that's out of scope currently. And if you hover over these things, so the quick start guide, yeah, so that's basically in flight. That's what I'm working right now. That's P1, but it would be really nice to get this in. And so if someone has some cycles later today, after we land everything else, refreshing the quick start guide to do like a non-secure connectivity example of just dynamic claim provisioning, maybe like taking even the services guides and slimming them down, or revamping the existing WordPress examples and ditching the GitLab example from that guide until we get it, refactored or whatever. Most of the content is still good there, but that's something that would be nice to get a little help with, even though it's a P1. So I don't know if anybody feels like they might have bandwidth for that, but and then if we go to 781 and just drill into 781, there's a checklist in there. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so this is just kind of, the detail there, but 781 up at the top. So the checklist in here, if we just kind of go down, so the welcome page has an update. Quick start guide stays the same unless we do it in 777. Getting started basically has been removed and replaced with the services guide and the stacks guide. And I'll take the PR feedback on 793, Dan, to rename. So the current deploy.md content is part of that refresh, though. We kind of want to remove that, and then we can go and tick those boxes off. Running resources probably needs an update, and so that's kind of still an open issue. The concepts is something I'm going to be tackling as part of 636. Related projects could probably, be skipped if necessary. And then the CRD reference, we need to basically get Nick's stuff integrated in the left-hand nav for his auto-generated API. So that's currently like the outstanding work in flight. So after we land, we just need to make sure all these boxes get ticked, and I can go through and start tackling that, and then call out for help where needed. So basically, the quick start would be something that would be a great item if people have time. Otherwise, we could potentially just delete the quick start and not have it in the docs.
Would it make sense to assume that we probably won't have time?
I would rather ask and then see.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help with the quick start, especially if we're just doing some sort of like simple example. I have a PR that I think we're going to discuss in a minute that's updating all the examples using portable classes, which is like, those are examples of quick starts essentially. So I'd be happy to collaborate on that.
Okay, awesome, cool, thanks, Tim.
All right, so for me, that it's pretty clear that 717 is not, we can punt on that and remove it from the milestone, and potentially include it in the release notes as a known issue. Wafik, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, like if that issue is like happening on all buckets, all buckets, I can take a look at it, and like it seems like an easy fix. Maybe I probably will have time tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. It's only happening if you set a specific field. If you just omit the field, then the buckets are fine. At least that was the case when this issue is open. But if you're working on that, then I'd be happy to like do a kind of a knowledge transfer on that, move off it.
I honestly, at this point, I would say to put definitely that we should punt on this. I would not want to take any more code changes on right now and have any more churn going in. So I would prefer to punt on this because it's not affected the mainline scenarios for our guides. It's not affected. GitLab updating the GitLab experience is not in scope anymore either. I would not take any more code changes on. Thank you though for volunteering them, Muafak. How are you feeling, by the way? Are you still sick? Are you feeling any better?
I'm getting better, but like still in the sick mindset, you know.
Sick mindset.
Like, you know, sleeping on the floor stuff.
Oh man.
Hope you get better soon.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, and then renaming the GitHub organization, we were able to secure the, right now we have Crossplane.io as the organization because Crossplane org itself was already taken, but we were able to secure that. So we have it in our possession now and we could switch over. Suskin brought up a very good point that this is a risk that has unknown potentially unknown implications that might not have very easily scoped mitigations or workarounds either. You know, if something goes wrong and that we don't expect, we might have to get GitHub support involved or something. So in the worst case, so to minimize risk here, and this is not critical for 0.3 for the release, it's just nice to have. Everything is quite functional as it is. I agree with Suskin's proposal that this not be handled in 0.3 and that we push this out just to minimize our risk here. I acknowledge that we knew about this 27 days ago and it did not handle it earlier in the milestone. And so that's my responsibility that I should have handled this or taken care of this earlier in the milestone so that we would have had it done and we could have handled any of the fallout or issues that cropped up with it during the milestone. So I take responsibility for that and I apologize, but we will have to do this next milestone.
We still think you're awesome, Jared.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so that is all the cuts and punts and we've been through everything that's left in the milestone. I had also, sorry, were there any community topics or things that weren't release related that anybody wanted to bring up in this forum today? I think we all have a 0.3 mindset right now, in addition to a sick mindset that Muafak has. Okay, so I listed a couple of PRs here that are in flight. We talked through 793. I don't think there's more to bring up on that one. We've already talked through that one a number of times. Unless, Phil, there's any more lingering things you want to bring up. Okay. And then Suskin, we talked about the stacks guide too. Is there anything you want to bring up there?
Sure, yeah, so I haven't, yeah, cool, thanks. Yeah, I haven't looked at it since last night, but okay, there, no. It'd be nice to have someone look at it. I feel like I got some comments from Dan, which I need to reply to now. But I was hoping to either have someone look at it and like go through a test run or just read through it to make sure I'm not just in my own echo chamber here. But it's okay if we don't have time to do that. So that would be my only comment, that if someone has time to take a look at that before we merge it and refine it, then I would appreciate that.
Yeah, the initial pass that I took through to just like see the structure of it, see the style, read through some of the content, not follow through. I did not execute the commands, but read through most of it all. It looked very high quality. It looked very good. So I don't at this point have qualms or big reservations about merging it into master soon, and then iterating further as we, go through and test the guides and go through the manual testing process and do the integration of the cloud-specific stack guides. I think it looked pretty darn good quality to start with.
Yeah, I agree. And my comments on there are mostly just like a namespace naming conventions that we've kind of been like circling around on and that sort of thing. So they're things that could be addressed later. They're more stylistic. And then I'm working through with the Azure guide right now in tandem with the general stacks portion of it. So I'd be happy to put an approval on that pretty soon here if needed.
I was just going to give a comment on namespacing and other things. I think, and you guys mentioned this, but I'm thinking like making sure all of those are kind of compatible only is possible after all of them are kind of like in a state that are ready to go. And then after that's, they're checked in, someone goes through and looks at those namespaces and everything's kind of like compatible and everything. I think that will be easier. So we shouldn't be worried about compatibility in that level as that much at this point.
Yeah, that's reasonable, Javad. Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
Cool.
Okay, awesome. And then Dan, you opened a PR for updating all the examples to use portable classes. Was this somewhat of a mechanical thing, or did you? I assume you didn't walk through every single one of these examples and create instances and manually test all of them, right? There's no way you would have had time to do that, unless there were 4 or 5 Dan Magnums, and now we understand your secret.
Yeah, no, I haven't gone through and tested all of them. The kind of my mindset in doing this was just late last night, and I was just thinking like all of these examples are broken because we're using portable classes now. So they should all work with the updates that I've made. And I've kind of shown in most of the places, except for buckets, because it gets a little confusing with how those are configured. In most of them, there's only one claim, and then there's classes and portable classes for each provider. And it kind of demonstrates that functionality as well as provides some defaulting examples, which is an issue that was open about adding defaulting some of the examples and stuff. And we kind of settled on that would just be kind of ingrained in some of the other guides, but this actually shows it with examples. So it illustrates that. So basically my thought process is that they can't get broken anymore. So the fact that they've not been all tested is not a major concern to me. At the same time, this is not something that we said, we've made an intentional effort in the services and stacks guide to provide all YAML configuration in the guide that you can just catch straight to a file. And so there's a couple places where it references the workload examples, which have not been edited. So I left those as is. This is just the simple examples with individual resources. So yeah, that was kind of my thought process. Let's get these at least closer so that, there's not a bunch of claims in there directly referencing strongly typed classes, which you're not even able to do anymore.
Right, that is just completely syntactically broken.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you very much for taking a pass through this to get it to a more up-to-date, quality level and functional level. Where did we stand now on updating or deleting or cleaning up the examples folder? What's the latest thinking on that?
We talked a little bit about just wiping them all out, which just because I did this, I'm not against that at all. I'm still completely fine with wiping all these out if needed. But I don't think we ever settled on a direction specifically.
Yeah, so we basically said that we could do that as a follow-on to 0.3 since they're just in master.
That's right. I remember that now. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and we have bulleted out the stuff as a sub-bullet of 625.
Cool. Cool. But yeah, I'd probably be partial to taking this change soon, since it's a great stab at getting them back to syntactically correct, and then figuring out which ones we want to remove or which ones we want to support going forward after 0.3, because it's only affects master and not the release branch. Really makes a lot of sense. So that sounds good. So we'll probably land this PR I think soon today then, Dan.
And 782 is basically what you'd be looking for if you want to update all the examples as far as issue that's tracking that. There was also a question there for AWS creds and GCP creds, and if we need those scripts still, if they're only for GitLab, and then if we need one for Azure to simplify the process for that. So,
right, cool. Thanks to link, Phil. Okay, and then the API reference docs PR that Nick put together. That was the last one I had on this list here. And so I think that Nick has basically all of the API references completed here. So yeah, that'd be good to get this into master soon too. I think this is ready for a full review. And then I think though that it may be missing, it looked like Nick didn't quite understand the process for getting things into the table of contents.
Yeah, I was gonna note that.
Yeah, so I helped him out, gave him that. So when he's up, he'll be able to see this and then make these additions as well to get the documentation, however we want to, into the table of contents.
Yep.
Yeah, we do not, yeah, just to be clear for everybody, to get documentation added into the table of contents here, there is no change necessary on the website HTML itself. You do not need to make any commits to the crossplane.io.github.io repo. You only need to make changes in the markdown itself with these special headers that give a directive to the static site generator that generates the Crossplane.io docs and tells it how to insert your page into the table of contents. So no HTML. We don't have any front-end programmers in this community, I don't think. So it's probably better that we don't touch JavaScript and HTML ourselves. We'll have to have our hand held by Connor or Michael or Steven.
And Suskin found a trick for getting live preview to work off of the doc from the local Crossplane docs. And so there's a PR open in Crossplane IO.
Oh, that's right. That's where it is.
That basically, I don't know if that's going to land here pretty quick, but if you want to use that command, it'll let you do a live preview of your docs changes, so you can see the table of contents and how that actually looks.
Yeah, I took that for a test run myself locally. It was super useful. So yeah, if you want to see how your docs render on the actual real Crossplane.io website locally on your laptop, you can use, I'd like to merge this. I think that it wasn't Unix friendly, Phil, like the commands to get npm installed, but I don't know if that's a huge blocker, if that was addressed. But the logic here is, it worked great for me, where you could bring up the website and have it automatically refresh every time you make docs changes is really useful.
Yeah, thanks Suskin for finding that trick. So glad to help get that in there.
Hey.
And I'm also down with the hyphens, by the way. I was just being consistent with the other underbars. So, you know.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I was like, oh, I don't know if we want to do that, but it's consistent with the rest of the make file. So just, when in Rome.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry too much about the underbars in this case because it's because of a folder name.
Cool.
Okay, so that is all the pull requests that I had on this agenda here, and that is the end of the agenda as a whole as well. So I think we talked through everything that we needed to discuss and figure out for getting the 0.3 release. That is tomorrow morning. So we definitely need to wrap everything up, all loose ends, by the end of day today, before the release train runs tomorrow morning Pacific time. So if there's any questions on priority calls, scopes, cuts, anything, we need to figure that all out today. So let's stay focused. Let's try to get all this stuff wrapped up, and we will, be very happy on the other side of the release tomorrow. Are there any other items that anyone wants to bring up before we adjourn this meeting?
Yeah, actually.
Go ahead, Mafik.
Go ahead, Mafik.
Right, so it's like GCP repo has a pull request. that fixes an old issue. The subnetwork resource cannot be updated. I will test it now, but like I'm not sure whether we want it in the release.
Where,
It's like one line change or something.
where is it?
The first one on top.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So we're already doing the same thing for region.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will test the PR now, but like, if you don't want it, that's also fine.
Look at this comment. Is this Nick?
Calm down.
And no, me, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
And
That is a very it seems like you've been learning from your mentor Nick since you joined the team. That's a very Nick-like comment.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that seems somewhat reasonable because it's a single line and it's already a pattern we're doing for another field as well. So if your testing looks good on that one, then update the PR comments. And then we can take a look and probably approve that one too.
Cool.
Okay.
So I just got
Phil, you had something too?
comment. Yeah. And so for the demo party at 11, if people can prioritize doing the portable WordPress demo and just showing that, and we can basically like round robin maybe. We're going to record that and then take that to a conference in San Francisco on Wednesday. So
Tomorrow.
That is tomorrow.
Tomorrow's Wednesday, Phil.
There's nothing like video editing on the airplane. So yes.
Just
yeah, Phil, I was going to have a question. Do you want that to go through the stack guide that we have created, or do you want it? Because I remember I had like this script which does that for you as well. Would you rather to go through the doc itself, or does it matter?
Either way. I mean, ideally the stack guide, but if that's going to take way too long or be too complicated, then yeah, the script is fine.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Rob, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just saying timely for the video.
Oh, okay. Got it. Awesome. Okay, so that I think that's everything for this meeting agenda today. So great work, everybody on 0.3. We have one more day here, wrap everything up, and then be really happy with what we put out there tomorrow. So thanks everybody very much for the meeting here, and we'll adjourn for this week.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.